to this program. My name is Eric, and I will be your host for today's webcast. Please note that today's call is being recorded, and all participant lines will be muted during this broadcast. If you need assistance at any time today, please send an email to SOA@compartners.com. Today's presentation will last up to 90 minutes and includes time at the end for questions and answers. However, you may enter a question for us at any time during today's presentation. You may submit a question by typing it into the box in the lower left corner of the window. Then be sure to click on the Send button located next to the box. If you are listening to the audio only and do not have access to the chat box, you may submit your questions to SOA@compartners.com. These instructions will be repeated later in the program. In addition, I would like to draw everyone's attention to the links box located to the left of the slide. To view or print the presentation slides, just click once on the presentation handout link, and a separate web browser window will open to display the information and allow you to print it. We would like to remind you that the SOA adheres to a strict antitrust policy. For more information on the SOA's antitrust policy, please visit the SOA website. One final disclaimer, presentations are intended for educational purposes only and do not replace independent professional judgment. Statements of fact and opinions expressed are those of the participants individually, and unless expressly stated to the contrary, are not the opinion or position of the Society of Actuaries, its co-sponsors, or its committees. The Society of Actuaries does not endorse or approve and assumes no responsibility for the content, accuracy, or completeness of the information presented. Attendees should note that the sessions are audio recorded and may be published in various media, including print, audio, and video formats without further notice. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Stuart Klugman, who will be today's presenter. Please go ahead, Stuart.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you all for dialing in or logging on to this webcast. We appreciate the great interest in the topic. We know that the SOA's education system is of interest to many people, candidates, employers, and many others. So today I would like to walk you through what's going on. I'm going to start with a brief discussion of some small changes that are coming in 2017, and then spend the bulk of my time telling you about the big changes that are coming in 2018. And I'll divide it up into three sections. We'll talk first about why we're making the changes, then talk about how the exams themselves are changing, and then the final component will be the transition rules as we move from the current system to the new 2018 system. And then there'll be a few additional items at the end to complete the presentation. So let's get started and talk about what's happening for FM and MFE starting in 2017. We've announced these changes previously, and at the FM and MFE homepages, you'll find links to a page with further information about them. The first administrations of these exams under the new learning objectives will be in June 2017 for exam FM, and in July of 2017 for exam MFE. We have posted draft learning objectives that could have some small changes yet, and the supporting readings at the dedicated web page for this change. I want to make it very clear that only when a syllabus appears on the exam's homepage does it become official and be the syllabus that relates to a particular administration of an exam. So as long as these learning objectives live only on the dedicated web page for the changes, they should still be considered draft form and not fully official, though we believe we are very close to the final version at the moment. There are no specific transition rules. If you have FM on the old version, you will have FM on the new version. If you have MFE on the old version, you will have MFE on the new version. Both of these exams are currently done by computer-based testing. Currently, for both of them, candidates receive instant unofficial results upon completion of the exam. We expect that to continue for exam FM. We will not be able to do that for exam MFE. Our advisors at Prometric, and we have agreed with their advice, have indicated that the MFE changes are significant enough that we could not give reliable instant results in the first few administrations of the new MFE. So for a period of time, those taking MFE starting in July 2017 will have to wait for their results for the usual approximate 8 weeks. What are some of the changes? For FM, all the derivatives material except for interest rate swaps will be moved to the MFE exam. There will be a study note on interest rate swaps so that you won't have to buy a separate text if you're studying for this exam, as those swaps are not fully covered in all of the recommended textbooks. There will be a new topic on an alternative way to approximate the effect of changes in interest rates. So that study note will lead to some additional material, as well as a third study note on determinants of interest rates that will be added to the syllabus. Those study notes are in their final editing phases. By the end of this month, we will have those 3 study notes posted, again, at the dedicated web page for these changes. So MFE then acquires the derivatives material moved from FM. In turn, some of the advanced stochastic processes material will be removed. We have made sure that the new MFE still relates to chapters that are in the McDonald text, so it will be sufficient for preparation for this examination. With that, let me turn to the big changes coming in 2018. And the first section is about why the SOA decided significant changes were needed to its ASA pathway. This issue began in being studied in June of 2015. The board adopted a suite of learning strategy initiatives, one of which was to take a look at the ASA curriculum. A task force was formed to do that work. It was chaired by Jerry Brown, who is currently the SOA's president-elect. And the task force created a straw man proposal that was distributed to many stakeholders in early 2016. Based on that feedback, several changes were made and a presentation given to our board in March. The board provided additional feedback, asked us to talk to a few more stakeholders. Again, a few small revisions were made, and a final proposal was brought to our board in June of 2016, and it was adopted at that time. As with the FM-MFE changes, we have a dedicated web page for information about the 2018 changes. So you can see the web address at the top. It can also be linked to from our other exam pages. I do want to note one part of that page, maybe a little small on your screen, but the lower right-hand corner is our area for frequently asked questions. It's possible on this webcast we won't be able to get to all the questions that come in, but we do get a record of them, and any of them that are new will be added to the FAQs after this webcast. So we will be making an update to the FAQs based on the questions that we get today. There are 3 key drivers for the changes. One of them is predictive analytics. There's broad consensus from all of our stakeholders that adding a significant amount of predictive analytics education to our pathway was critical for the success of future actuaries. And it was deemed critical to the success for all actuaries, not just those in certain practice areas. Therefore, it was appropriate that the predictive analytics material be added to the associateship curriculum and thus be part of every actuary's education. Currently, we do some analytics for everybody. We have time series and basic regression, and then, depending on track, some other advanced topics might be covered. Adding predictive analytics presents some challenges. One is the word has a lot of different meanings to different people, and so we have to determine precisely what techniques belong in the ASA curriculum and how deeply we should go into each of them for ASA level knowledge. Another challenge, which I'll address later in this presentation, is how you deliver and assess this material. It's not well suited to multiple choice testing, so an alternative is needed. Another item that was a challenge that I don't have a bullet point for was if you're adding to the curriculum, should anything be cut? Or is predictive analytics so important to be added that it should be on top of what we're already asking ASAs to know and not replace anything? And again, broad consensus from the stakeholders we contacted indicated that this was important, and so important that we shouldn't look for other things to cut, given that those were all viewed as important as well. The second one is an imbalance between short-term and long-term insurances. And by that we mean short-term coverages are those that typically have contracts that last a year, and while there may be some runoff in claims that need to be adjudicated and paid, they tend to run out fairly quickly. So this would more or less be the health and general insurance practice areas. They're certainly increasing in importance now and have been steadily increasing since the founding of the actuarial profession well over 100 years ago. We have a well-established curriculum in the long-term insurances of life insurance, annuities, and retirement benefits. So our current ASAs know quite a lot about long-term insurances. They know much less about short-term insurances. And so we thought it appropriate that what we ask all our members to learn about is equal in the two areas. So what does that mean for our current examinations? For MLC, it won't be a large change as we already cover the key actuarial functions of pricing and reserving. What we don't do in exam MLC at the present time is talk about estimating the parameters. Some of that's done in exam C currently, and that would move to exam MLC to make it more self-contained on the long-term front. Exam C does not cover pricing and reserving for short-term insurances, so that will be a significant addition to exam C, and in turn some of the material from that exam would then need to be moved elsewhere, and that's part of the plan. A third one has to do with the International Actuarial Association. The Society of Actuaries is a member of the IAA, and all members of the IAA must have coverage of a minimally acceptable syllabus that they create. And so for many, many years since this became a requirement, the SOA has met the IAA education guidelines through its ASA curriculum. A few years ago, the IAA formed a task force to do an update of that curriculum, and it has led us to consider some changes that we might need to make as well. The IAA has yet to adopt a revised curriculum, so we're viewing this as guidance on good practice as opposed to a requirement for the SOA, although some of this may well become a requirement in the next few years. The key changes are the addition of accounting, which was actually something our fellowship exam committees have been asking for some time. A greater emphasis on assets data and predictive analytics, which just aligns with the call for more predictive analytics that we've been hearing already, and some upgrades to the coverage of professionalism and professional practice, most of which we already have in our system. So based on these drivers for change, here is the plan. And so I'm going to show you this slide now, and we'll return to it later, but I wanted to give you an overview of the scope of the changes. And again, the print may be a bit small depending on how you're viewing the slide, but there's one very obvious thing on here, and that is that the new column has 2 more boxes than the current column. So this goes back to the notion that to get predictive analytics into the curriculum, we are adding components, but we are not removing any components. The color coding is by the type of assessment. And so the top 3 in each column is a reminder that there were 3 VEE type subjects before, and there will again be 3 VEE subjects in the new system. The blue ones are those that are examined by a traditional test, either multiple choice or short written answer. And you can see one of the additions is that type of assessment. The pinkish orange colored one for predictive analytics, as I mentioned before, that's a subject that will need a different kind of assessment, so it gets its own box. The last 2 components are the Fundamentals of Actuarial Practice course and the Associateship Professionalism course, which will undergo very little change in this new world. The arrows in the diagram relate to the transition rules, and I'll have more to say about that later. So, I kept the slide up while I was talking about it, but again, to note that there are 2 new components, the Statistics for Risk Modeling exam and the Predictive Analytics assessment to be discussed later. Clearly, it will take longer to become an ASA under this new plan. We hope it won't be too much longer, but again, a stakeholder consensus, perhaps other than candidates who are just in a hurry, was that it was worth it for the new material that we'd be adding, and we'd be producing better actuaries as a result. So let me talk a little bit more about some of the specific topics. On the VEE side, as mentioned, there will be 3 VEE topics. The economics topic is essentially unchanged. There may be 1 or 2 learning objectives tweaked a bit, but it will continue to be easy to fulfill by the typical introduction to micro and macroeconomics courses taught to freshmen at most every university. So we don't see any real change here in the list of approved courses. Accounting and finance, this is where we're bringing in the accounting requirement. So this replaces the corporate finance VEE, and with the addition of accounting, it's a 2-component requirement. I'll talk about this a little bit more as well later, but you will have the ability to fulfill the accounting and finance requirements separately. So you could do accounting at one school and finance at another school. You have to earn your grade of B- or better in both to get the VEE credit. You can't apply for the VEE credit until you have both of them. And for those of you familiar with the VEE process, this would be similar to the way we currently handle the applied statistics topics of regression and time series. Mathematical statistics is a new VEE topic. It's the applied statistics VEE topic is disappearing, being replaced by examinations. And we've added mathematical statistics. Essentially, today, mathematical statistics is viewed as a prerequisite. You need to know some things about it in order to do well on later exams, and a few of the basics of mathematical statistics are included in the current Exam C syllabus. But with the increased emphasis on predictive analytics, we viewed it important to make sure that every one of our candidates is exposed to mathematical statistics. If you're wondering what that means, it's essentially the second half of a typical university course that starts with the probability course that would prepare you for Exam P. So it often uses the same book. The first half is probability. The second half of the book is mathematical statistics, where you cover how to do hypothesis tests, the various methods of estimation, maybe some basics of other techniques, including some non-parametric techniques as well. So it's a very standard course. Many of you who are in the pathway or got a university degree in a related subject probably had to take this course anyway, but now we're adding it as a formal requirement. Topics to be formally assessed. We will continue to use computer-based testing, so the process will be the one you may be accustomed to. You go sign up, go to a Prometric test center, take the exam on the computer, and in some cases get instant results, instant unofficial results. Sometimes you do have to wait for the pass mark to be set after the fact. So I want to talk a little bit about each of those 5 exams and give you a little more detail of what they're about. The probability exam will have some slight updates to Exam P, but they'll be fairly small and maybe just a topic or two. We believe that we will be able to maintain instant results with those small changes, although we can't confirm that until we have show the new syllabus and the changes to our partners at Prometric. Financial mathematics, a lot of the changes for 2017 make this one pretty much in place. There may be a couple of topics, again, added that are not in the 2017 version. But again, we want to keep the changes small so that the computer version of this exam can also continue to offer instant unofficial results. The investment and financial markets exam will see some more changes. So MFE is going through one set of changes for 2017, but there'll be additional changes for 2018. In particular, there will be less emphasis on the financial economics, on the derivatives subject, and a bit more corporate finance. Well, there's very little corporate finance right now, but some corporate finance topics will be here. They're topics that we thought were important enough to be tested, and so will be removed from the current corporate finance VEE requirement. The short-term actuarial mathematics exam will replace Exam C, and as I hinted at before, this exam will probably have the greatest amount of changes. We need to introduce pricing and reserving for short-term insurances. So that essentially will be the pure premium and loss ratio methods for pricing, and the development method and other methods of completing loss triangles for the reserving part of that exercise. In return, some of the basic statistics topics that are on Exam C can be removed because they'll now be covered in the MathStat VEE. So we can assume that candidates can do some higher order tasks in this exam than they were doing before. And as also mentioned, some of the estimation topics, particularly for mortality tables, will move over to the long-term exam. This exam will, again, continue to be a multiple-choice exam administered by Prometric, but again, with the massive changes, it will be unlikely that we will be able to provide instant unofficial results for a period of time. One of the new exams, Statistics for Risk Modeling, which essentially replaces the regression and time series VEE, but will add some topics, in particular an introduction to the generalized linear model, will be a multiple-choice exam. It, too, will be computer-based, but again, as any new exam, we won't be able to give instant results at its first several offerings. Currently, exam MLC is tested by a combination of multiple choice and written answer. That will continue to be the case as we make the change to adjusting a few of the topics. There's no issue with computer-based here, being as it's not a computer-based exam. And I'll mention on the next slide why we made some of those decisions. Finally, the predictive analytics exam, which is new, will be assessed using what we're calling a proctored project. Details still need to be worked out, but our board has directed us to do two things. One is reflected in the word proctored. So we don't want this to be a take-home exam, such as in our modules right now. They wanted our candidates to do their assessment under the watchful eye of a proctor or supervisor. So we want this to be to have some assurance the candidates are truly doing their own work. The project part means that we don't want to use multiple choice or short written answers, but rather we want candidates to demonstrate what they've learned through this process by actually being able to apply predictive analytics techniques towards the solution of a meaningful problem using a large data set and answering a realistic business question. So to that end, we need to have it done in a setting where the candidate would have appropriate statistical software available and could employ that software on the data, and then also have appropriate word processor available to be able to write their report, add graphics as necessary, and not only demonstrate that they were able to conduct the analysis but could communicate it as well, because we do envision that communicating the results of an analytics exercise will be part of the objectives for this course. Excuse me. So we have a vision right now, but we have to make sure we can realize it, and that's essentially that a candidate would bring a computer to the exam room. Special software would be run on that computer, which would lock out the things we don't want candidates to have access to, but allow them to access the things they will need to do their project. They will perform it on the computer, create a Word document as their answers, and then submit that for grading. And so that's where we're at right now in our thinking. Over the next several months, we'll be doing research with the companies that provide those kind of services to lock down computers and see what we can do that will meet our needs to appropriately evaluate candidates. The choices we made were to some degree out of convenience. There's a lot of work for our committees to create a new syllabus, to write the new questions, that we decided that in the short term we don't want to disrupt any further with regard to how we do the assessments. So for now, we're going to leave each exam or its successor being assessed the way it currently is. And our goal, though, in particular, is to complete that short-term, long-term balance by having those two exams assessed in exactly the same way. We'll want to work with our vendor to see if there's some improvements we can make in the tools candidates would have to work on those exams to be able to capture something other than a multiple-choice answer. But our goal is definitely to move those two exams to where they're being assessed in the same manner. But a good bit of that will be to find a way in which we can do that assessment in an efficient and effective way. The FAP and APC are not expected to change in any fundamental way. FAP will still be 8 modules with an interim and final assessment. The APC will still be a one-day in-person seminar on professionalism topics, in particular the Code of Conduct and Standards of Practice. There may be some content tweaks to each of them, but they really won't affect candidates in their preparation in any meaningful way. For the APC, there is no advanced preparation, so you can show up and learn what's presented. So if that changes, that's not a problem. For the FAP, if we do change some module content, generally we structure those changes so that candidates can either complete the version they're on if it's a substantial change, or if it's a small change, they just keep moving forward from where they left off and might encounter a slightly different reading here or there. But we don't anticipate anything significant with these two components of the ASA pathway. For timing, all revised components will go into effect with the first administration after July 1 of 2018. So we don't have dates yet for the new pieces as to when the first assessments will be. But for any existing piece, Our plan is to do this starting July 1, 2018. We have learned that there's some possible issues with our Prometric vendor with regard to that specific date. So there's a slight possibility that there might be an adjustment of those dates for a couple of the computer-based exams. And if so, we'll know that fairly soon, certainly by the end of this year, and be able to communicate any revisions. The third component of my presentation is a discussion of transition rules. First bullet is the most important one of all. If you're not an ASA by July 1st of 2018, you must complete the new requirements instead of the current requirements. If you are an ASA by July 1, 2018, you're exempt from the new requirements, provided you are in fellowship within the next 4 years. I'm going to expand on both of those in a moment. For CERA, we have something similar. That again, if you get your CERA requirements by July 1, 2018, you can be held to the current requirements. I do want to move forward here. Then I'm going to go back to the slide. The ASA by July 1, 2018, I want to make sure everyone listening understands what that means. To be an ASA by July 1 of 2018, your name must appear on a published ASA list put forth in June 2018 or earlier. So you must actually be an ASA. So you must be in our records as an ASA and a member of the SOA by that date. So all requirements must be met, and they must be met in time to get your name on the list, which is an extra step besides just finishing all your requirements. And here's a simple example of how this could be implemented. There will be an Exam C in June of 2018. So you'll be taking Exam C in June of 2018 while the old exams are still in effect. But suppose that was the last thing you needed to be an ASA. The results don't come out officially until August. Therefore, your name can't possibly appear on the ASA list until August at the earliest, and maybe even September. And therefore, you would not be an ASA by July 1, 2018, and will be responsible for the new requirements. Of course, you'll get transition credit for Exam C, so your having passed that exam will still be worthwhile, but you will not be able to get an ASA under the new requirements. Well in advance of 2018, we will inform candidates what they can do in 2018 that will allow them to make the deadline and what won't. So obviously the June Exam C won't, but there will be other things that are less obvious that we'll have to communicate. A particular one that will be very important for us to communicate is for those for whom the final assessment of FAP is your last objective, the last thing you need to be an ASA. We'll give you a date, and if your FA is submitted by that date, and we haven't determined the date yet, but there will be a date, and if your FA is submitted by that date, we will promise you that it will be graded and that it will meet that component will beat the deadline as long as you submit it and pass, of course, by the given date. So we know that's one bit of uncertainty. With exams, we know when they're taken, we know how long it takes to get grades posted, but we also know the grading queue for the final assessment can vary in length of time, and therefore we think it appropriate we give you a date that will guarantee you the opportunity to get your current system ASA, provided you pass. I want to mention something else about that 4-year window for FSA. At first glance, it may seem that we're being punitive here, that we're saying, Why are you giving me a deadline when I should have as much time as I like? If we were actually to apply the standard SOA policies in this case, anyone who is not an FSA by July 1, 2018 would be held to the predictive analytics requirements, regardless of when they get their ASA, because our policy is that to get an FSA, it's not what you need beyond your ASA, it's what you need in the total package. That's the pathway. So an example would be, and I'll give myself as an example, if I had stopped taking exams when I got my ASA and then wanted to pick them up today in doing all the conversions of the exams I had passed, it would turn out that I did not have credit for the Fundamentals of Actuarial Practice course. And if I wanted to go on to an FSA today, I would have to go back and get that, even though it's a current ASA requirement. So we're actually being generous here and saying if you thought you were on a particular pathway to fellowship today, you can still employ that pathway as long as you get it done by July 1, 2022. And, of course, you can always take the predictive analytics exam if you like, as our exams are always open for everyone if you feel the knowledge gained would be valuable. Another key point that's very relevant to this is that you never lose an ASA. So no matter how many changes there are to the system, once you get an ASA, that's always retained. So even though your ASA may not reflect the current ASA requirements, once you get it, it's yours as long as you retain your membership and pay your dues and are not expelled for code of conduct issues. And then the second part is what I just talked about with regard to our policy on how you go from ASA to FSA. So here's the chart again. And now it'd be a good time to look at the arrows and note that the recommended transition is pretty smooth. If you have one thing on the current system, you get at least one thing on the new system. So no credits will be lost. And in addition, a couple of the things on the old system actually get you two things on the new system, although two of them map into the same place. So you have an opportunity on the old system to get transition credit for everything except the new predictive analytics component. So again, we think that's a pretty easy transition, and it should have an obvious consequence for candidates, and that is there's every incentive to keep passing exams. It's hard to envision a scenario with this where you'd say that waiting to take an exam till after July 1, 2018 would be beneficial to your progress, because everything you get today will bring you something in the new system. So as noted, but now it's here on the slide, if you have the VEE applied statistics, you get both VEE Math Stat and Statistics for Risk Modeling exam credit. Similarly, Exam C also gives you Math Stat credit as well as the short-term exam credit. But there's no way to get transition credit for predictive analytics, as that topic doesn't exist anywhere in our current syllabus. I'm going to spend a little time talking about VEE. That's a little trickier than some of the other components that we have. For any VEE that a candidate attempts to acquire, there's two key dates. There's the date when you earned the VEE credit. That is, when did you take the course? When did you actually earn the grade that relates to an approved VEE course? But as many of you know, you don't have to submit your request to have that approved right away. You can wait. So we use the term claimed date to reflect when you actually apply for the credit. So that's when you pay the fee, do the paperwork, and then get your VEE credit approved and onto your transcript. There's no maximum time between earn date and claim date. I took a mathematical statistics course in 1969. If I could find someone who had a syllabus for that course and presented it to the SOA. I think I got a grade of B- or better in it. I could claim that credit, even though it's been over 40 years since I took the course, provided the content actually did meet the current BEE Math Stat syllabus. So there's no statute of limitations, and it can be retroactive. Again, when it's time to apply for VEE Math Stat credits, my school, if they still have a record, have the syllabus for the course as it was taught then, could send it in for approval. So what does that mean for some of the specific exam VEEs that are on the new system? Because the economics changes are minor, we're anticipating nothing will really happen. If any course that was previously approved for VE Econ will continue to be approved, whenever courses come up for reapproval, we will hold them against the slightly changed objectives. But our expectation is there will be absolutely no changes in which econ courses meet the VEE requirements. And so any econ course you've taken would satisfy the current ones, but would also satisfy the new requirements as well. And again, for transition credit, if you earned the VEE credit before July 1, 2018, but applied for it and claimed it afterwards, you still can apply it through transition to the new econ requirement. Accounting and finance, because it's a two-component requirement, there'll be not two separate application forms, but you'll have to provide evidence that you've met each of those requirements. This is the one place where we've extended the 2018 deadline. So you'll notice that's not a typo on the slide where it says July 1, 2019. Here, as long as you have the current corporate and finance credit, and remember it's earned, not claimed, earned by 2019, July 1, you can still transition it to both accounting and finance. This is partly because we're expecting a flood of VEE applications, and happens in the room I'm in, the person who's responsible for processing them is sitting across from me, and she's very relieved that we've staggered some of the VEE work. For the finance part, we expect, again, any course that was previously approved for corporate finance will continue to be approved for the finance requirement, though it's possible that because of some of the changes in the finance requirement, there may be some new finance courses coming on that didn't meet the old one, but would meet the new one. And of course, we'll have to start the process of approving accounting courses to add them to the VEE directory. For applied statistics, that VEE is ending. So there you have to earn, again, not claim, but earn by July 1, 2018. So you need to complete the course by that time. That meets that requirement, and still be claimed later, but those courses will all have their eligibility end on July 1, 2018. Math Stats completely new, so we'll be at some date yet to be announced. We'll be taking applications from schools to have their Math Stat courses approved for VEE, and we will make it clear to them that can be retroactive. So courses they've offered in the past can be submitted as well. So students who've taken those courses in the past could claim VEE credit for them. There are no other special issues that I don't think, other than the ones I've mentioned. And again, because each exam converts directly, your credits get updated to the new system as soon as it comes into effect. Recommended order. As you may know, we don't require you to take your exams in any particular order. We do have some recommendations on our website as to what sequences we think makes the most sense. But candidates are free to take exams, for the most part, in any order they like. And that's been a general SOA policy for a long, long time. We will have a recommended order posted for these new exams, but we do have two exceptions. One of them is just continuing a current policy. You can't register for the Associateship Professionalism course until you're just about finished with your ASA. And that will mean in the future missing either the FAP final assessment or one exam, but not both. So if you're one thing short of getting your ASA, you're eligible to sign up for the Associateship Professionalism course. So that's just a continuation of a policy we already have. But here's one that's new. This is a formal prerequisite. The Statistics for Risk Modeling exam must be passed before you can take the predictive analytics requirement, before you can do the proctored project and learn that additional material. We're doing that for a couple of reasons. One, we want to send a strong signal that that content is very foundational for predictive analytics. We want to make sure that people have demonstrated an understanding of it. But in addition, we want to be sure people are prepared because the predictive analytics assessment will be a greater investment. It will probably cost more than a current exam. It will require more of the candidate's time and even a greater investment on resources to grade those projects. So we want to be sure candidates who come into that predictive analytics assessment are well prepared to do well. For those of you who might remember Course 7 from the 2000s, it's a very similar philosophy there. We had an exam that people had to take before they could come to the Course 7 seminar, again, just to make sure that people had done preparatory work and were prepared to do well. And so that's one of our goals here. And again, we haven't done a recommended order yet, but our assumption is that the predictive analytics proctored project will come fairly late in the ASA pathway. We want that project to have some practical bearing on it, so we think it will make sense for candidates to have been through their other exams, maybe even have started or working on the FAP modules when they do this. And so we think putting this prerequisite in will not be a burden to most candidates who would have done that anyway. But again, we want to send a strong signal that this material is especially important for doing this exam. We did have to make some changes to the CERA because that pathway depends on preliminary exams as well. We thought that the best balance would be, since the CERA was to be similar to an ASA in the challenges it presents to candidates, so adding two components seems very reasonable. And so we added VEE Math Stat and the Statistics for Risk Modeling exam. So the CERA is similar to the new ASA, but the predictive analytics and long-term math exams will not be required. And in replacement, the ERM module and exam will continue to be required. When this was brought to our board in June, they thought that was perfectly reasonable for those who wanted to be a CERA, and it definitely meets the requirements of the CERA Global Association, of which the SOA is member. However, with the emphasis on predictive well, let me back up a moment. As part of the administration, I should say, of the CERA, anyone who earns a CERA and who isn't already an ASA has been entitled to apply to become an ASA based on their earning the CERA. Our board viewed that predictive analytics is so important that everyone who's an ASA going forward should have that subject. Did a modification to that policy, and now if you get a CERA and you're not already an ASA and want to become one, you must also pass the predictive analytics assessment, and then you can apply to turn your CERA into an ASA. There's a variety of transition rules, and actually, rather than go through these one by one, I would ask you to consult the web page and look at the details. It can be a little bit confusing because some of the CERA requirements are in the current or the new associateship pathway. Some are in the fellowship pathway. But what we've tried to do is create the CERA rules so they would operate as close to the ASA rules as possible to allow people, in particular, to give people who are along the pathway time to finish it up without having new things thrown at them unexpectedly. I have a few additional things to comment on before the question period begins. For timing, we expect to have the syllabi established by the end of 2016. So that is the final learning objectives for each of these components. We'll definitely have the readings in support of those objectives identified by July 1, 2017. So anyone who plans to prepare to take one of these new exams or assessments in 2018 will know a year in advance precisely what they'd have to learn to be successful on them. Similarly, we need to identify exactly how the predictive analytics assessment will be conducted, and we've set a July 1, 2017 goal for finalizing that. So by July 1, 2017, you should know exactly what's coming, although again, at least from my point of view, none of that information will likely cause you to want to delay passing exams today and getting that transition credit. Our fellowship exam committees have been closely monitoring these changes. They're excited about it because they now know that the ASAs will know things they don't currently know, and that therefore they can alter the FSA curricula to reflect what the new ASAs will know coming into their part of the pathway. So they're looking at those changes now, but clearly they can't actually implement those changes until we've produced some ASAs who have that additional knowledge. So there will be some FSA changes coming along, but not for a few years until they have some new ASAs to work with on their pathway. We've been asked many times, what about the other associations that use our examinations? So as you may know, several other associations either use our examinations as a way to get qualified with their organization, or they may use our designations themselves as a way to earn membership in their organizations. So throughout this process, we've been sharing our draft proposals, and of course, ultimately the proposal that was adopted by the board with the leadership of these other organizations, asked them to provide us whatever feedback they think would be useful and it would help them in their decision to continue to use our examinations or designations. So we're in a continual communication with them. So far, we've been, I'll use a double negative here, we've been given no indication that they won't be using our exams in the way that they've been using them before. However, they have, and appropriately so, want to reserve making an official statement about that until they see a final syllabus and can make sure that it does continue to meet their needs. So we're monitoring that very closely, but obviously in the end, what any other association decides to do with regard to our exams will be their decision. With that, I don't have a slide. We never made a slide that says it's time for questions. However, it is time for questions. And I'm going to turn it back to Eric for a moment, and he will once again remind you of how you can go about asking questions.
Thank you, Stuart. As Stuart said, we will now have our question and answer segment of the webcast. As a reminder, to enter a question through the web conference system, simply type your question into the box in the lower left corner of the window and click on the send button. We will read the questions out loud and respond so that everyone may hear them. And if you are listening to the audio only and do not have access to the chat box, you may submit your question to SOA@compartners.com. Stuart, please go ahead with any questions we have.
Okay. And remind you again, we also get all of the questions that are typed in are captured by our friends at ComPartners, and they will send that to us. And those we didn't get to, will be added to the FAQs as we go along. So let me start. The first question is, does the new predictive analytics exam require a college course, or the E-module is sufficient? It won't require a college course. What we do expect for the predictive analytics is there will be online support, which is a little bit different from the online modules that we do. The support will be there to help guide candidates' learning, and in particular, we want to support whatever textbook we choose for that exam with examples with case studies that will help candidates know what their ultimate project will look like. So we don't want them to come into that proctored project having no idea what type of questions they might be asked or what sort of answers might be expected. So we're anticipating some online guidance, but it will be for the candidate's benefit as a resource, and not quite the same as the way we would do online work for our modules. We expect many universities will be teaching predictive analytics techniques. Many universities already do. It may be difficult at a given university to cover the exact suite of topics that will be on the exam, but we expect many universities will at least partially support their actuarial students by giving them some analytics education. The second one is, would you recommend taking the FM exam before or after the change? I'm assuming that refers to the 2017 changes. So the one challenge you get, and this isn't really a recommendation, so I just want to make the facts clear. If you pass FM before the 2017 changes, you will have passed an exam with derivatives questions. If you then take MFE after the change, your exam will again have derivatives questions. Somebody might view that as oppressively redundant. Others might view it as, hey, I already know that material and I nailed it once. I've already got a head start the next time I do it. And there's obviously the reverse. If you pass MFE on before 2017, there's no basic derivatives on that, and then the FM after 2017 will have no basic derivatives. But you really can't do. It's hard to do the MFE exam without knowing the derivatives basics anyway. So you're probably going to want to have read through that regardless. So if you're looking for my personal recommendation, it always depends on individual circumstances, and I think most every candidate likes to pass exams sooner than later, and so you want to go for the one that gives you the best chance of passing as soon as possible, and then move on to the next one. Question about when will the new MFE have instant results? We don't know. This is something we work through on exams with our vendor. What we have to do is have trust that we've got enough in the questions in the item bank whose reliability we can trust. So when you don't do instant results, it's because we want to check out each of the new questions that have been written and help understand their difficulty level and other aspects of them, and then they can be thrown into the item bank. When that bank is built up to have enough questions in it that we trust and on candidate performance, then we can give instant results. But we don't like to set a deadline or ahead of time, because a lot depends on how those questions perform when we actually give them. And you actually, and I realize nobody likes to wait 8 weeks for results, but it also means that you're getting fair results based on the actual questions that you answered, rather than somebody's guess at, at how difficult they are. As a question is, will employers prefer actuaries with ASAs earned after 2018? I think, again, this is just my opinion. We haven't asked employers this particular question, so we don't have any feedback from them. But I did sort of hint at it. The real issue is how important predictive analytics is to your employer and your career pathway. And if if it's not part of your required exams, then the question becomes, how are you going to learn it? And one way would be to use other SOA continuing professional development activities, of which we have many in the predictive analytics area, or you could go ahead and write the exam anyway, knowing that passing or failing will not affect your progress towards fellowship, but it might be a way to demonstrate to an employer that you have that knowledge. But to be honest, we don't have any direct feedback from employers saying, on this date it's going to become very important to us that we hire those people. The next one is, how will VEE credits be transferred from the old system to the new system? And we're hoping it'll be seamless. Again, whenever we've gone through a transition, your credits persist. And one of the things, please don't flood in with calls now, but we do have our customer service folks with calls now. But if you get to a point down the road where you're not sure of what you actually have credit for, we can have people here analyze your progress and tell you what under the current system you have. But the transferal, as I understand it, is your transcript still shows the thing you've actually earned, not the thing it transitions to. So then if we have VE applied statistics, no, you don't have to take the new math stats VEE or the statistics for risk modeling exam. So that's part of the transition. So again, if you have the applied statistics VEE, will get transition credit for those two components, and you will not be held to those new requirements. And because the applied statistics VEE ends on July 1, 2018, there's no question as whether you got it in time or not. And again, a reminder, that means you have to have completed the course or courses, earned the grade by that date. You could do the paperwork to claim the credit thereafter. Will the new FM MFE be considered a pass for EA1? That's something we have not investigated, and so we will do so, and we will check in with the joint board and see what their plans are to do with the changes we're making. How will the proctored project for PA be assessed? The way I would expect this to go is it will be assessed similar to any of our written answer exams. The difference is, instead of a series of separate short answer questions, the project will be one thing that's turned in and graded as a whole. So there'll be a team of volunteer actuary graders who will read the assessments, grade them against a grading guideline. So to assure uniformity, there'll be specific things they'll be asked to look for. There'll be points assigned to them, and those who get a lot of points will pass. Those who don't get very many points will fail. And importantly, those whose points are in the middle will have their paper judged by at least one more person to make sure that they got graded fairly and accurately, and then a decision made on passing or failing. So we'll use a process very similar to the one that we've been using for fellowship exams. Question of, will the stochastic processes be covered at all? They won't be completely removed from MFE, but they're going to get a pretty light coverage on the ASA requirements. One of the things we found on the MFE exam is that the stochastic processes material there was being done mostly by memorization of facts. So everyone knew that DT squared was 0, but it was very difficult to test them in context or to really know how these things are used to solve actuarial problems. So we have asked the fellowship tracks, and they've been happy to do that, to incorporate that material as appropriate for their track. So obviously if you're on the quantitative and finance investment track, you're going to get a heavy dose of that material at that point, while if you're on the group and health track, you'll see much less of it. Do these changes alter the order of exams? One thing that clearly won't change is we currently recommend P and FM be done first, although not in any particular order between the two of them. And as they're undergoing very little change, we still expect candidates will be taking P and FM first. For the other four exams, so thinking of the long-term, short-term, what's now called investment and financial markets, and the statistics for risk modeling, those would seem to be fairly independent of each other. So candidates could really pick and choose from among those four exams in any order that makes sense to them. As I'd mentioned earlier, we have a formal prerequisite for predictive analytics, but we also expect to recommend that it be taken more along the time you're working on the FAP modules than while you're working on the other exams. Even though they don't necessarily have predictive analytics content in them, they do have actuarial content, which should make work on the project a bit easier. Is the PA assessment a project or exam? Well, we could call it an exam in the sense that you sit in a room and produce something and then somebody grades it and gives you a score. So it's an exam in that sense, but let's call it a project so it's not confused with our multiple choice or short written answer question exams. So it will be a project. It will be a single thing that you submit. So it would be a lengthy report. We expect candidates will be spending several hours working on it. And as I mentioned before, we expect that it will be taken a bit later in the pathway. The study hours question is going to be a difficult one. Both we normally don't recommend study hours for any exams. We generally leave that up to employers to decide what works best for them and their employees. But it will most likely, I suspect, be treated as any other full-length exam. So the short-term, long-term exam, the exam of sort of maximum length in that environment would probably be a good benchmark. Are the lengths of any of the exams changing? I expect there won't be much change. We have any exam that's done at a Prometric test center, we have a maximum of 3.5 hours. So no exam will go longer than that. My expectation is that they will be their new versions will be the same as their prior versions. We haven't yet discussed the statistics for risk modeling exam. We'll do that after the syllabus is set, so we have a good idea of how many questions it will take to cover that material and how much time candidates should have. So the only thing I can say for a fact is that 3.5 hours at maximum. It's possible, though, it will be slightly shorter. If you receive your ASA by June 2018, but decide to become a career ASA, do you lose your ASA in 2022? And the answer is absolutely not. No matter when you got your ASA, and I know ASAs who got theirs 30, 40 years ago, it's good for life as long as you continue to pay your dues and don't violate the code of conduct. Your ASA is good forever, regardless of whatever changes happen. But again, as I mentioned, after 2022, if you want to go on to FSA, then you're held to the full pathway requirements. So it's not the ASA to FSA requirements. It's everything you do from beginning to FSA that you haven't done previously become your requirements. And again, that's been our policy for a long, long time. When can faculty apply for the new VEE requirements? So we haven't set a date yet for opening it. So the first thing is, right now we have a committee working on finalizing the learning objectives for each VEE. So the first step is to have their work completed. That's already in progress. They've made some suggestions and some changes. Then there's a whole computer infrastructure that has to be altered to accept those new applications, to create the forms for submitting them. So that work has begun as well. So we don't have a date as of yet, but we hope it will be by the end of the year, maybe sooner. And again, remember, it's retroactive. So you can, if you've got a course on the books now that will be available for this new VE credit, you can still apply for it down the road. And again, there's no point in claiming, for example, for your students to claim Math Stat VEE until they wind up actually needing it to get their ASA, which won't be for a few years yet. A question: I took college accounting for college credit in high school. Can I get VEE? So that would have to be a specific circumstance, because it really depends how that college credit was awarded. And if that college credit appears on a transcript from a college, it would be good. If not, probably no. But your best bet is to send an email to VEE@SOA.org and have someone look at your particular circumstances. But essentially, we need proof that it was a college course, and we have a variety of ways of establishing that. You'll have to get credit for all 3 VEEs by 7/1/18 to avoid the new requirements. Essentially, the answer is sort of. And again, the new requirement, VEE, is the Math Stat. So if you have the VEE Applied Stat requirement, then you do get transition credit for the Math Stat requirement. But if you don't have VEE Economics, you can always pick that up afterward. And similarly, if you don't have corporate finance credit by July 1, 2019, you will have to pick up the accounting credit to complete your ASA requirements. But again, remember, the key date is when the courses were taken and the grade earned, not the date in which you filled out the paperwork to claim your VEE credit. What accounting courses are you envisioning for VEE credit? This will be the typical first-year accounting class at a university. And one of the things we're going to do some surveys on as we prepare the documentation and the learning objectives is the typical first-year sequences are often split into what's called financial accounting and managerial accounting. And so we'll try to get some words that typically describe the course we're looking at. We believe it will only take 1 accounting course, even though most schools have a 2-semester sequence in accounting. But a lot of that's going to depend on how particular schools' accounting courses align with the learning objectives that we set up. But we're trying to, and one of the reasons we're not releasing them right away is we're now doing some research into what schools do teach in their accounting courses to try to make it as likely as possible that candidates can meet the requirements with a single course. And so that research is also ongoing. Are the VE requirements a prerequisite for the APC? The answer is yes. You have to have everything completed other than 1 exam or the final assessment from the FAP modules. And so we don't count VEEs as the one thing you can be lacking. Does a current FSA have to take the SRM before taking the PA proctored project? because we've never done prerequisites before like this, we'll have to figure out how to do that. I presume we could have a waiver done for those with an FSA, because while we do allow FSAs to take any exams in our pathways if they feel it would be beneficial to them, they don't earn them additional designations of any kind. So that's one we'll have to investigate whether we can accommodate that. Do the new stats and PA exams, how are they related to the CAS stats exams? That's a to be determined. So I'd mentioned that the other organizations are looking at what we're doing to decide what to make of what we do. We also know what's on the CAS's Exam S, and we're really in the same situation. When we have finalized our learning objectives, we can look at other organizations and decide what we'll give credit for. Currently, Exam S gives VEE applied statistics credit. What we'll do with that credit going away, what we do in the future is to be determined. And I should add that's to be determined for several organizations. We have arrangements where we give credit in our system for various components from the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries in the UK and the Australian Actuaries Institute. With our exams changing, we'll have to revisit all of those, and they'll have to do the same to see what's appropriate as well. So it's also interesting that other associations around the world are also changing their exams as we are, partly due to the predictive analytics revolution and partly due to the IAA changes. So all of that's being looked at, but we're not prepared to make any statements today as to how we will be treating exams from other organizations. Will the FSA exams after July 1 reflect the new ASA syllabus? I don't think it'll be immediate because, again, the people jumping into those FSA exams will almost certainly have all gotten the ASA the old way, the current way, and even some of the ASAs afterward would have gotten much of their ASA through transition components rather than through the new ones. So we're asking our fellowship committees to be cognizant of the fact that they're doing this. In some cases, we may choose to say, for your fellowship exam, this new ASA learning objective is now a prerequisite. We're expecting you to read up on it. Here's a place you can go do that. We're not going to formally test you on that subject on your FSA exam, but we think it would provide important background for you. So all we're doing at the present is asking them to be very careful in how they manage this process so that as the ASAs they work with change through time, the new curriculum, that they'll be treated fairly and given every opportunity to be successful. Okay, this is great. I've actually got these numbered. This is the 21st question I've addressed, so I'm really pleased that we're getting a lot of questions and appreciate your engagement with us here. Will the SOA offers CPD for those who earn the ASA. So there's really two ways. We have CPD on a lot of this subject, but we also always give CPD credit, as I mentioned, for people who go back and learn something through self-study or for actually taking an exam that they were never tested on. So part of our CPD rules actually incorporate how much CPD credit you get for studying for and actually taking an exam, whether it's for credit towards your designation or not. What software will be used? Currently, all the work we've done has pointed us towards using R as the software. It has the advantages of being free, and maybe I'll repeat that, it's free. Very few other software packages have that characteristic. It's easily accessible. It runs on pretty much any computer system. The learning curve is modest. And though as part of if we use that or whatever we use for the PA exam, there will be either the book we choose will have very good instruction in how to use R built into it, or we'll have an online module to help candidates get R installed and teach them the basics of it. So they'll have a sufficient fluency in R when they approach their proctored project. Now, of course, it's entirely possible in a year from now something else will be on the scene that we think is better, but we will also want to give people plenty of advance notice as to what computer languages or software will be used on the assessment. So I'd be very surprised if it's not R, but we haven't made that commitment yet. Regarding the new accounting VEE, okay, the financial management, I guess I've answered that one. So again, it's probably financial accounting. It's probably one semester, but we're still working on nailing that down with our committee. Would a candidate who takes the May MLC next year meet the deadline? Okay, I presume it means, or exam meet the deadline. The answer is no, because the MLC grades for spring exams come out in July. So that would definitely be after July 1st and not have the ability to make that list. The ones I'm more concerned about setting dates on where it's not so obvious are any computer-based exams, whether we can speed up the instant results process, for example. I don't know if we can. And again, the big one is the grading of the final assessment and making sure we get everybody processed in a reasonable time frame. Will we need a guaranteed date for attending the APC? So one of the things we expect to do, we haven't, again, not everything's been nailed down completely, but one of the things we've talked about on the APC timing is, one, we know there may be extra candidates wanting an APC in the first half of 2018 to meet this deadline. So we're going to try to use some predictive analytics techniques to forecast how many people that will be. And we'll want to schedule APCs to meet that demand. And it's possible we may not even do an APC in June that year, just to make sure that we only have people coming through in May and that we can process them and get them on the June lists to meet that deadline. So we have a lot of control over the APC to some degree. We obviously have to schedule venues to hold that seminar. We have to recruit faculty to teach it. But because we're not relying on a computer vendor or exam centers or item writing committees to prepare questions, we do have a little more flexibility in how we can manage the APC during this transition. So we'll hope to not let signing up for the APC be a barrier to candidates trying to meet the deadline. If I took a VEE regression course, but not a time series course, how does that affect the July 1, 2018 deadline? It affects it totally and completely. If you only have half of the components by July 1, 2018, you can't claim half credit. So you must have both components earned. Remember, you don't have to claim, but you have to have your grade, your transcript, your grade, and completed both regression and time series components by July 1, 2018 in order to have that count and apply it towards the new requirements. How frequently will the new exams be offered? So, again, our mode is that for the short term, we're going to keep doing things the way they've been doing them. So the new versions of P and FM will be 6 times a year. We expect the new versions of MFE and C will be 3 times a year. As they've been, the MLC will be 2 times a year. We have not settled on the statistics for risk modeling exam, but I would expect that it would likely be a 3 times per year exam, as it kind of sits in the same position as MFE and who we expect to be taking it. These are driven by candidate numbers. Now, the more candidates who sign up for our exams, the more frequently we can offer them. And we have that many more candidates taking P and FM relative to any of our other exams that we can justify 6 sessions per year. But after that, there's a considerable drop-off in candidate numbers. And so 3 exams per year is currently what seems to be beating the demand for seats at the testing centers. Will Prometric give the PA course on their computers? No, that's for sure. At least right now, they don't have the capability to do the kind of exam we envision. Maybe someday they will, and we can use their services. But for now, we'll have to have either people bring their computers or the SOA supply them ourselves in some way. But we don't anticipate being able to use Prometric for this exam. Will transition credit for SRM serve as the prerequisite? Yes, that will be absolutely true. So if you have transition credit, you have the exam, and your prerequisite will have been met. When will approved courses for VE accounting be available? I think I mentioned that we're working on it. Again, it's all retroactive, so the actual approval process of people submitting the courses and having them vetted and signed off on could take a little while. But if your course meets those requirements, regardless of when you took it, it will still be good. How much will this lengthen travel time? I'm always reluctant to make estimates, and that's why I didn't put one on the slide. And the reason is that candidates have their own way of doing things, and whenever we've changed the system, candidates don't always react the way we thought they might. Sometimes they wind up taking longer than anticipated. Sometimes they're in such a hurry it makes no difference. Obviously, if there's more things to do, it will take a bit longer. But I'd say for a successful candidate, one more exam. So if you think of being able to knock off an exam every 6 months, that might be the extra time for the one new exam. The unknown is the predictive analytics component. Again, this is a different kind of learning and assessment than we've been accustomed to in the past. And so we're not sure how long it's going to take candidates to study for it. We're not sure what the pass rate will be, so that will also affect how many people have to show up for a second try. So there are some unknowns, and we'll see how it plays out. So again, try to clear up the VE issue. If you take the courses before but claim them after, which requirements are you held to? You're held to if you're in the process of claiming VEE courses after July 1, 2018. You obviously didn't earn your ASA prior to that date, so you're held to the new requirements, but you can transition into them. So if you earned your VEE applied statistics before July 1, 2018, but are claiming it afterward, you are being held to the math stat requirement, but you have credit for it through the transition. And so that's the way this would always work, is your earned date is the important date, and then you transition it through to the new requirements and then see what you have and then what you have left. If you have transition for VEE applied stats but not C, can you get math stat credit? Yes, you still get math stat credit. We've offered math stat is sort of implied in both components, so we're allowing 2 ways to get math stat credit. And so if you do either one of them, you'll get that transition credit. And do we have time for one more? Okay, I think this is the last one I'll take here. If MFE results are not instant, will we receive decile scores? Yes, you will receive decile scores for sure. We may not, for some of the exams, we've been giving performance feedback to those who failed. That may be more difficult early in the transition, as we don't have the statistics to back up where those boundaries should be to define who's performed at various levels on the topics. And with that, I believe our time has expired. Eric, do you need to do something to finish us off?
Thank you very much. Yes, with that, we will conclude today's webcast. If you take a look at the links box on the left-hand side of the screen, you will see an evaluation for the webcast. Please take a moment now to complete the evaluation and give us your feedback on this program. Click on Submit when you have completed the evaluation to send us your responses. Your comments and suggestions are very important to us, and they help us to provide you with this kind of quality programming. To register for any upcoming webcasts or meetings or to purchase recordings of previous webcasts, please visit www.soa.org today. Thank you for your participation in today's webcast. We hope to see you here again soon. Today's program is copyright 2016 by the Society of Actuaries with all rights reserved. This concludes today's program. Thank you. You may now disconnect.